Others are trying to get out of the dollar system. There's a dollar system that now is being changed. India is dealing directly with Russia, and holders of dollar-denominated assets don't want to hold those dollar assets if they feel that they're going to be grabbed and so on. There are things that are happening in our lifetimes that never happened before. The amount of spending, financed by debt, the amount of internal conflict, the rise of great power in the form of challenge, China to challenge the existing world order, and so on, the alliances with Russia and all of that. And so I needed to study the rise and decline of reserve currency, so I went back 500 years to see the Dutch guilder and the patterns of the past. It helps me. And then when I did the study, I did a book, because I thought it was important to pass along. And then I wanted to make it very clear and digestible. So the animation that you're talking about is very clear and digestible, so people can put what's now happening in the perspective of these historical patterns, which helps people think about what's coming next. Right now, the U.S. is imposing sanctions. Sanctions it's a form of economic warfare, and it has a big implication for the dollar, right? Okay, now others are trying to get out of the dollar system. There's a dollar system that now is being changed. India is dealing directly with Russia, and holders of dollar-denominated assets don't want to hold those dollar assets if they feel that they're going to be grabbed and so on. So what's happening now has happened many times before. And I learned this in my past because in 1971, I was clerking on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And President Nixon gets on and he says, we're not going to give you the gold that the dollar is backed by. And we had a devaluation. It took me by surprise. I walked on the floor of the stock exchange. I thought it was going to go down a lot. It went up a lot. And that's because I never experienced the currency devaluation. I found the same exact thing when I studied history. Same exact announcement took place on March 5th, 1933 by Roosevelt and had the same effect. So I understood then how history before me was important. Studying the Great Depression allowed me and Bridgewater to anticipate the 2008 financial crisis. If I didn't study that, what's happening now is very relevant, is a guide to the past, is a guide to what's happening now. As we are approaching a challenging of the world order, in other words, a great power challenging another, there is an increased likelihood of some kind of war. There are 5 kinds of wars. There's a trade war, a technology war, a geopolitical influence war, a capital war, which we're in the midst of, and then there's a military war. And those things drive countries to be self-sufficient and independent. And as a result, globalization diminishes and nationalism increases. How does it affect the markets? It affects the value of money, most fundamentally. Like what we're seeing now is that the value of money, when you run very large deficits and you have to spend a lot. You have to spend a lot on social programs. You have to spend a lot on defense. You have to spend a lot on environmental programs and so on. And so when you spend a lot more money than you earn, then you have to print money to make up that difference, to make the purchases. And then that devalues money. And so it's like the examples I gave you of the 2 currency devaluations that you had before. 1971 led to the inflationary period of the 1970s. And so you have the stock market. Yes, the stock market goes up and other things, but cash is trash. And people then begin to learn that the bonds that they're holding have negative returns. And it starts to change the value of money. The value of money, the value of dollars and so on. So money goes into other assets. It produces more of an inflation, and you start to enter a certain type of environment. And the environment that we're in is beginning to be very much like that of the 1970s. And so I think that what you have to think about is the value of money. How much money does one have in debt instruments, and do you want to own that as an asset? I think they're bad assets, and so and then how do you diversify? And the system also has to deal with what is money? What is money? Is the dollar going to remain the same sort of reserve currency? And then you see the development of alternative monies. We're seeing a variety. I think different types of money will compete with each other in the environment we're in. Maybe it's crypto, maybe it's gold, maybe it's other things. Maybe the digital renminbi competes with the U.S. dollar. We're going to come into an environment because everybody thinks that think about how much money is being stored in debt instruments, those debt assets. Think about how poor those returns are. So that kind of a shift, I think, is very important.
Can the dollar stay the world's reserve currency when we are when inflation is at this high current level and likely to remain this way for some time?
So all currencies have a lot of debt. And so when you look at one relative to the other, there will be a lot of printing. I mean, currency equals debt. And when you hold a currency, you're holding a debt instrument. And so all of those will decline in value relative to other things. Now, will the dollar decline more than other currencies? It's almost certain that we're going to come into this environment. We're in this environment in which there's a shifting of those currencies. So you're going to see more of China's renminbi being used. You're seeing India have a direct link with Russia on the currency. So we're in an important change in the currency. But how that is a store of wealth is a different question. So a currency is a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. And its storehold of wealth is now a problem, particularly for the dollar, but it's also a problem for other countries. So that's why you have inflation. As money goes into other things and the cost of borrowing is so low relative to the inflation rate, then it encourages the borrowing of money and the sale of money. In other words, not holding financial assets like that. So yes, I think you're changing the nature of what money is and what the dollar is as a storehold of wealth.